He's got it on mute. Anyway, the title is O-boat to S-boat, but actually I started right at the very beginning of my naval career. So I hope you'll put up with me as I go right from the very start. So, yeah, okay, there we go. My years of service, including that end. Of course, yeah, and Venture, yes, so Wilf is also a graduate of Venture, but I'm a first year Venture. Yeah.
No senior.
No, there were, I walked through the big gates down there in September 1954, 70 years ago last week. Just a long time, for sure. I see the parade ground is still kind of there, I think. The buildings are all gone. But lots of memories from those 2 years. And to get there, I grew up in Shelburne, Nova Scotia, which was, during the war, a repair base. And it had quite, it had 2,000 or 3,000 people at one time. So my dad was stationed there during the war, and after the war, we were moved from Ontario to Shelburne, and from there I attended Army Cadets for 4 years. Every summer I went to some summer camp, and then the last year I went to the Banff National Cadet Camp. So that was quite an honor. So I trained from Shelburne to Banff, 3 weeks in Banff, and while I was in Banff, I was informed that I'd been accepted as a cadet for Venture. So another 6 days back to Shelburne. This was in August. I think I was home about a week, and that was another 6 days on the train back to Esquimalt. So I had lots of train time that time. In fact, I'd arrived a day late. Everybody else was already there. Yeah. But it was good. And
I'll make you out.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So there I am. My first season, I was the chief cadet captain on of the 2-year tours. And this just another picture showing me as a chief cadet captain. And this, I put this picture on because in front of us, over to the right, is Field Marshal Montgomery. He had come to visit the West Coast, and he inspected our little group. So that was quite an honor. So as the first of the Venture classes, we had the privilege of serving 2 tours on Ontario. And the first one was 4 months. And from Esquimalt, San Diego, through the canal, over to Halifax. I had my 18th birthday in Halifax, I remember. And to Portsmouth, through the Kiel Canal, to Copenhagen, Oslo, Norway. Like you said Glasgow, but actually it was Edinburgh. Jamaica, San Francisco, and then back to Esquimalt. So it was quite a trip. It was good fun. I remember particularly in England, we went up to London and stayed at one of the little officers' clubs. And somebody, for whatever reason, had arranged for us to have tea with lady somebody. And she was a lady. So about 6 or 10 of us, I think, went and had tea with this lady in Portsmouth. You know, so a little guy from the boondocks of Nova Scotia having tea with a lady. Yeah, but that was fun. Next year, we went on a cruise to Hawaii and Yokohama and back again. That was shorter, 2 times. But those were good days on the Ontario. Did you go on Ontario, Wilf? I don't think so. No. But there were 162 of us joined the Venture. And graduating class, I think there were 102. And on our website, I think there's less than half still remaining. There's the Ontario. I don't know if any of you ever saw her or not. But, I was in the forecastle. And if you look very closely on the forecastle, you'll see 2 little heads. And I think one of those is me. because that picture was taken just off Portsmouth before we went in alongside. There's a company in Portsmouth that does the specialty in taking pictures of ships. So that was good fun. Sleeping in hammocks. And we had a chief petty officer, Bigelow, who was our sort of seaman expert. He was a bosun, and he taught us how to sling our hammocks and how to roll up our hammocks. And he would inspect our hammock stowage every day to make sure that we'd done it the right way. Yeah. And then there was another petty officer, Gallo. He was a bosun too. He taught us ropes and things like this. He was a character. He was lots of guys you remember their names somehow. I don't know why, but you do. So while in Japan, we were invited to the Japanese Naval Academy and given a tour, and they demonstrated some of their skills on fighting with big sticks and things like that. And the next day, this picture appeared on the front page of the Japanese newspaper. So there we are, having a good lunch. And when we got back to Hawaii, we had to dress up the quarterdeck of Ontario, sling the awning, get all dressed up tidily. And we were required as young cadets to dress in our mess kit and entertain young daughters of people who were officers in Pearl Harbor. And the picture looks a bit distorted, but does it look all right to you? And there we are, all dressed up, trying to do our best manners. So after venture, 2 years in venture, we were the Mars officers. We had different, there were some engineers, there were some pilots, there were some supply officers, and all the Mars officers, the seaman officers, went to Halifax and spent the next 8 months doing all our general courses: gunnery, navigation, seamanship, leadership, communications. We went to Cornwallis for our leadership course, and there's all of the group that went with my class. And then we did another time in Cornwallis as the communications thing. So after 8 months, I received my posting, and I was posted to the destroyer Crusader. So she was the first trial ship that had a BDS. And that's basically all we did. We had a group of people from the Defense Research Establishment riding with us all the time, trying out the BDS, lowering it and things like this. So we did some interesting trips around. There we are. I was on board for this picture, doing 36 knots. Mm. That was quite a time. Yeah. Yeah. We had our captain was a naval aviator, of all things. Pilots at that time, if they wanted to progress, they had to go back to sea and command a ship. And Mr. Commander Freddie Bradley had never been on a ship before. I think maybe as a lieutenant for a little bit. But it was an interesting experience. And the whole officers in that particular ship were very interesting. The XO was pretty long in the tooth, 2.5, but he'd flown swordfish during the war off a British carrier. We had two misters, which commissioned officers were called at the time, Mr. Bing and Mr. Middleton. And these guys had all wartime experience. So they would spin some real good tales. And at one time we went to St. John's, and they insisted I had to go to all the places that they went to during the war. Mistake. But anyway, it was an education, that's for sure. And as I say, we went several places. Went to St. John's, we went to Bermuda, and on one trip we were going to the UK to visit the underwater research establishment in Portland. Yeah, but on the way, we ran into a hurricane and were invited to try and help find any survivors of the Premier, which had gone down at that time. Spent 3 days looking for her. Didn't find anything. But we almost ran out of fuel. I remember the engineer was getting very concerned that we were getting very low. He didn't want to fill up the fuel tanks with seawater. So unexpectedly, we went into Ponta Delgada to fuel up and spend a couple of days there, yeah, in the Azores. And then on to Portland. And there is the Premier. Apparently what had happened was the captain knew it was going to be stormy. He was quite happy apparently about it, but it carried barley from Argentina to Germany. And instead of putting the barley on board in bags, they poured it in loose. And when the storm came, the hurricane came, the barley all rolled over to one side. And it went so much that they lost the thing and tipped right over. So only 6 survived out of the 82 of that ship. I just thought I'd throw that in to let you know one of the things. So on my time on the Crusader was a year, and I got my watchkeeping certificate. And as soon as I got my watchkeeping certificate, I volunteered for submarines. I'd always wanted to be a submariner. And of course, at that time, we didn't have our own, but we had the equivalent of 2 crews serving in British submarines and 2 British submarines serving in Halifax. So I volunteered on those days, we went by ocean liner. Nobody flew those days. So first class on the ocean liner, because the ocean liner still had classes. So I took my big steamer trunk. I can't remember what happened to that steamer trunk, but my dad insisted I have this big steamer trunk with all my stuff in it. And we landed in Liverpool, and somehow or other I got myself and my steamer trunk to Gosport and started the course there. And here we are, July to October 1958. We had 6 Canadians on the course. I don't know if you can see them. There's one there, one there, one there. He was the technical officer for the squadron, but he came over to do the course with us. Another one there, and myself, somewhere there. Jean Chereau, who didn't last too long. Gordon Shirley, who was in his 30s already at the time. And George Sakabowski and Cliff Saint-Pierre. Where's Cliff? Somewhere there. There. Both failed. So I was the only Canadian to gone all the way through. So after I'd finished the junior officer training course at Dolphin, I was posted to HMS Sea Scout. And she was a wartime S-class based at the Naval Base in Portland. Anybody been to Portland? Yeah, yeah. And that used to be the squadron for 6 S-boats. And we all were just day running, in and out, and while the surface ships did their workups. And it was a lot of fun. So we got to practice a lot of seamanship and coming alongside. The captain would let us do that quite often. And I was navigator, having never worked with DECA, which was the equivalent of GPS, I guess, for the day. It was kind of fun. But we would just do that, go out, ping, let them ping on us. But also, we also spent some time in Londonderry. Anybody been to Londonderry? Yeah. And you know, well, it's a long haul up that river. Yeah, it sure is. It's about 20, 30 miles, I guess. Yeah. And of course, you had to have a pilot on board. And this old Irishman, he would use points that nobody else would imagine. You know, that house over there be lined up with that post, you never know what they were. But we spent a couple of months in running in and out of Montreal. Go out to the week, leave at midnight on the Sunday, so we could be on the exercise areas, so the aircraft could come out in the morning and exercise with us. But, it was kind of fun. I was the only Canadian on board, but we had some other Canadians, about 3 others, I think, got me. One little incident when I was off to the watch once, and we were about 100 feet, I guess. And I got a call from the forends, it's a scraping noise going up in front. What's mean scraping noise? So we did a bank, you remember, at 75 foot. So the submarine was just gliding up that bank. That was, I always remember that. The boys in the forends, they were kind of concerned about the scraping noise under the hull. but I spent about a year and a bit on board Sea Scout. Then she went off to refit because they used to only run for 2 years and you have to go into refit for a year. So from there, I went up. There's some pictures of Sea Scout. You see the old snorkel mast? It was an add-on. So you had to raise it up, and lock it in, and away you went. And then we had to disengage the engine clutches. Yeah, the way before we could go submerged. Yeah. Yeah. So then I went to 3rd Squadron in Faslane to Grampus, which was relatively new. This was in 59. And she was the 2nd or 3rd of the Porpoise class that were built there. And we did a lot more operational stuff there. And in fact, we even went to Malta once and toured around. And also we had the Malta Royal Navy still had a considerable presence. They had a squadron there still in 1960. And then we took part in NATO exercises, and once we were away for 4 weeks total. At the same time, I got married in 1960. And Jennifer was with me in Scotland, in a little apartment building, an old Scottish hotel, I think it was, converted to flats. And didn't anybody ever know Harry Hughes? Harry was a Canadian electrical officer who was serving over there on the depot ship, because we were based on the depot ship, Maidstone at the time. And that's where we would have our mess and everything. So there's Grampus, looking your best. Yeah. So after Grampus, I was posted to another submarine, Acheron, in Devonport, which was a nice place. And when we were living in Devonport, we lived out on the moor, and a lovely big house. We had quite a generous rental allowance, didn't we? Well, yeah. So we had this big 6-bedroom house, I think it was, and it came with a gardener and a maid. Yeah, yeah, things have changed, that's for sure. But in one end of the house was another apartment, and an RN captain lived in there. So we were the landlord of the manor, pretty much. One day I came home and we had left the gate open, and all kinds of ponies off the moor were running around in our front yard. So we had to chase them out because ponies on the moor got dark quite often. Yeah. But the time came when they decided that I had to come back and do some surface ship time. So we reluctantly got on a liner coming back, a Dutch one this time. with our daughter, a new baby, and I went to surface ships for a couple of years. In Halifax, I served on St. Croix, and at that time they were switching coasts. St. Croix was going west, Saint Laurent was coming east. So the crews had to swap ships. So I joined Saint Laurent, and one of the big events on my time on Saint Laurent was the Queen coming to visit Charlottetown and Quebec City. And we were her escort on the Royal Yacht. She was on the Royal Yacht. So we steamed into Charlottetown and up to Quebec City, and there was a Canadian officer named Ron Binney. I think anybody probably know him. Did you know him, Wolf? Yep. But he was posted to the Royal Yacht during this tour. So Ron gave a bunch of us a tour of the Royal Yacht. And when we came off the ship and standing on the jetty, the Queen arrived back. So, see, the Queen was about as near as Lloyd is to us. Didn't say hello, but she was there. So that's my only claim to fame of seeing the Queen. So when they got back to Halifax, they posted me to New Waterford. So I spent 6 months on her in refit in Vickers in Montreal. And by this time, we'd had our second daughter in December of '64. So back we went in April '65 to the UK. We flew this time, Service Air, into Lahr. And we had to go from Lahr over to Gatwick and find our way to Dolphin. So because I'd been away for a while, I served on board Osiris for 4 months and did some nice little interesting things up to the Shetland Islands. Anybody seen the movie Shetland or the series Shetland? And yeah. So we were in Lerwick 2 or 3 times. Well, I think we were there about 2 weeks, and we'd run out and then come into Lerwick again. So every time I watch that TV series, I think of Lerwick. So after that, I was posted as first lieutenant of the A-class submarine Aeneas. Now, the officers called it Aeneas. The enlisted men called it Aeneas. I don't know why. Anyway, it was Aeneas. And I served in her for almost 3 years. And the best 3 years, I think, in my submarine time as XO of this boat. So when I joined Aeneas in late '65, she was just in the final stages of refit. In the dockyard at Portsmouth. And we were commissioned back in March of '66. And we have a few photographs to show you of those events. One photo shows myself and the commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander, James William Alexander Gray. The best captain I ever had. They're real sweetheart. And this was his 4th command. And he knew he wasn't getting promoted. So he was quite willing to bend the limit a bit. And his was affectionately called Bosun. But I always have fine memories of Bosun. But unfortunately, later in that year, he contracted stomach cancer, had to be relieved. And he passed away. I saw him when I finished Perisher in Dolphin, and I think he passed away shortly after that. But again, all memories. There's a picture of us bringing Aeneas back into commission with the gun. Yep. He insisted we have a gun. So he managed to talk Flag-off the submarines into providing us with a gun, which I think we fired about twice. So we had to have a gunner's mate as well from general service. So we had this 3-badge gunner had to come on board with us. And there we are, all tiddly looking up. and nobody wore uniforms at sea in those days. You know, what we call pirate rigging. I don't think anybody ever wore a uniform. But just whatever you had. You knew who everybody was, so it didn't matter. Wearing my sweater I bought in Nuremberg. I remember that. So the next photo I'm going to show you is the entire ship's company and taken off the coast of Norway. You know Buster? Yeah, I did. Well, Buster was the leading seaman on board an ES, and he was the outside ERA's mate. So he was on the panel most times. And on the action stations, he'd be on the panel, he'd be, on the periscope, the whole bit. And so we got to know each other very well. So Buster went on, as you know, to become C1 ERA, like you did. Yep. And his last posting was Maritime Command Chief Petty Officer with Peter Cairns. And we kept in touch over the years. In fact, he sent me this photograph. And he passed away, unfortunately, about 5 years ago now. Yeah. So I thought I had to. There's the picture. A bunch of scraggly looking bunch. My captain and I in the front. And I think Buster's way at the back somewhere, he told me. Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. All the submarine sweaters, that was a good trading thing, submarine sweaters, with Americans particularly. I think I got a really nice aviator jacket for a submarine sweater once. Yeah. But I have that picture on my wall. Buster sent me this one a few years ago. And there's Buster. There's Buster. Yeah. 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 Well, I'm glad you know who I mean. That's good. Great character. Yeah. He did extremely well. He was coxswain of the provider, preserver, one of them, didn't he? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we worked off the west coast of Norway for a while with the Norwegian Navy. Went into a couple of fjords. And remember, one time we went up to this little town way up a fjord, and we were just getting alongside the jetty, and there were about 3 or 4 little boys on the jetty. And these little buggers were singing, "We all live on this yellow submarine." In English, yeah. But I always remember that. And the next, we went to Helsinki. That was interesting. Anybody been to Helsinki? Yeah. Yeah. And then over to Lubeck. And of course, this was still Cold War time. And you could still see the East German guard just not far out of the city. All the guard posts and the big fences and the whole bit. But the British agent had invited a bunch of German submariners to come on board for a little cocktail party. 6 o'clock, 1800, on the jetty. There they were, all lined up, ready to come on board. And that was an interesting time. Yeah. This is in the wardroom. My captain there with the engineer. Yeah. 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 So Moser was relieved in late 66 by Richard Sharp, who had been one of my classmates on the junior officers training course. And Richard went on to be the editor of Jane's Fighting Ships for many, many years. So 4 months we went to the Mediterranean to work with other NATO navies. No submarine squadron in Malta anymore. So our first stop on the way to the Med was Gibraltar. And this was when FOSM was tasked us to be available to take part in the latest James Bond production of You Only Live Twice. I'm sure you've all seen it. Okay, so our job was to dive. That's right. And to surface under the raft, which held James, who was our engineering officer, actually, and his companion waiting to be rescued. Of course, you couldn't surface under the raft, it would go right off. So we had to do it the other way around. But the companion was kind of fun. We sent out an appeal to the ROC, the communications center in Gibraltar, which was full of Wrens, to volunteer to come and be the girl in the raft. But she had to fit the bikini. So, so we had lots of volunteers, but and the ones that came, well, we did it. It took 3 days, and actually we had 3 girls. But same girl couldn't come all 3 days because she was on watch or something. But yeah. But as I said, we put it on the raft on the fore casing, and I was the diving officer, and as first sentence for the trimming officer in British boats. So we managed just with old Buster's help, we went astern, dived astern, and the raft floated off, and it reversed in the film, and you can see it. It looks pretty good. It's about a 10-second scene, and we took us 3 days to do it. But they took us all out to dinner afterwards in Gibraltar, and then when the movie was produced, first screened, we were invited to, this was when we got back home, we were invited up to London to go to the first screening, and went to the Broccoli's office and met Mr. Broccoli and his crew. Yeah, we went all up by train. And here is the volunteer we had wearing the wig, which the girl in the movie had. Poor love, she was so cold, I think. Yeah. And there's James, our engineer. Yeah. So that's our claim to fame, being in a James Bond movie. So from Gibraltar, we made court calls in Tunisia, to Naples, Spezia in Italy, a couple of ports in Turkey, Izmir, and I can't remember the name of the other one, Corfu in Greece, and Cyprus, and in Haifa in Israel. And we also had a 3-week maintenance period in Malta, which was good fun. Managed to get around to do a bit of thing there. Haifa was interesting. We arrived in late May '67. I just had my 30th birthday, I think, just a couple of days before. And we were well entertained by the Israeli submariners and their wives. But the night that we were to be hosted ashore, we were expecting the submariners to come and pick us up. And as it turned out, the wives all came and picked us up. And we're the husbands. Well, they had gone on a sneaky over to Port Said, trying to find out what was going on over there. Yeah. But they showed up later, but that's where they'd gone to. But it was good. And of course, the 6-Day War was only a few weeks later. Yeah. Then we got back to Gibraltar, and because of the war imminent, we were held in Gibraltar for 2 weeks in case we were needed to go back. Yeah, so because we lived in hotels, of course, so there was no big hardship. Yeah. Oh, in Naples, some of us made a little train trip up to Naples or to Rome, and there we are sitting outside. What's the fountain called? I can't. The big fountain in Rome. And the captain is on the left, Richard, and young David Henley, the navigator, and myself in my smoking days, enjoying a Negroni outside the fountain. Another one there, the engineer as well, and another one of the officers. Yeah. So this time I'd been spending in the UK for 8 years out of the last 10. 8 years, I think, was the longest of any Canadian that served with the Royal Navy. Even the enlisted men, some of them did 5 or more years, but I think I was the only one that served that long. So it was time to come home, but I'd been selected for parachute. And after 5 months doing what was supposedly the most expensive course the Navy held, I was told that I'd passed. And there were 6 of us on this particular parachute, Lee and myself, Lee Temple, 2 Dutchmen, and 2 British. And our teacher was Sandy Woodward, who, as you know, he went on to command the Falklands campaign. And once I'd finished the parachute, where do I go? To Grills. Joe goes to Onondaga, I go to Grills. Yeah, makes sense, eh? Yeah. There we go. So I took command of Grills in August '68, having never served in a Canadian submarine before, let alone the U.S. It was a bit of a learning curve. Hey, all right, Bob? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, we're still British. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I had to learn all I had 2/3, and all these good expressions. Yeah, but it worked out okay. So we hadn't been back long. Um, we went on an exercise to Hawaii. Took a nice trip over there and did some exercises, sort of a rim pack type of thing, I think it was. And on the way back, we got alongside. I was met by the Admiral's Chief of Staff, Captain Robertson. One thing I remember about him, he was about 6'9". He was a big man, wasn't he? And he informed me that negotiations had been underway for us to maybe purchase a new Tench-class submarine. Well, new to us. Yeah. They were about to scrap them, so we were offered to have one from the USN. So there's Mo Tate and myself, as you know Mo well, I'm sure. I had scrambled to get a khaki uniform. I didn't have khaki uniforms when I got back. I only had a couple of days to get into kit to take this picture. So I was dispatched off to NDHQ to assist John Rodakanaki, who was working at the NDHQ at the time, and he'd been a former CO, of course, of Grills. And he was there trying to convince the Deputy Minister of National Defense that this purchase was a good idea. It's kind of funny. I didn't realize a deputy minister, the status of what he was. Now, I'd just come back from the UK. I'd have clue what the organization was, but I learned later that he was a pretty important guy. So when I got back to Esquimalt, we got our orders and up we packed. Everything, 2 planes took us to Norfolk. And after 3 weeks, we training and familiarization. We did a couple of days sea time with the other crew. And then we were ready to man our new submarine. But we had chosen the name before we even left, Rainbow. So we had name boards all made up, ready to go. And we went, yeah, remember that? Yeah. And they were ready to go as soon as we changed names. So that was nice. So we set sail on the 3rd of December, '68, and we passed through the canal, spent a day or two there, storing up, fueling up. and spent the long cruise way up from Panama all the way to Samo without a stop. It was getting pretty close. We had to cut corners a little bit. In fact, we could see the lights of San Francisco as we went by. And Keith Nesbitt was the navigator. And he was good at it. He was really good navigator. But again, more fun memories. And there we are in our new green uniform. And then we have Rainbow. And there's the commissioning ceremony. And you see on the left, there's Scruffy O'Brien, was the maritime commander at the time. Very charming fellow. And this man is Vice Admiral Arnie Shade. And during our perisher, both the Scorpion and the French boat and the Israeli submarine were lost during that fight. And Admiral Shade was very much involved. And there's some interesting reading about what happened about that sinking of the Scorpion. Wilf, are you familiar with all the history of it? Yeah. Yeah. I was reading up about it yesterday on Google. Yeah. Yes. No, don't think so. But yeah, I is he? Yeah. I know he had quite a wartime record. Yeah. Yeah. So in '69, after we got back, we had to do a bit of cleaning up, and we were doing just training basically with our aircraft and 407 Squadron. Time in dry dock, made a visit to the Rose Festival, which was kind of fun, going up the Columbia River. And after another task we were assigned was to go up to the Haida Gwaii and sit off observing a Soviet Eland vessel, which had been positioned there. Hmm? Yeah. Was it name it? Yeah. Okay. Well done, Jim. Thank you. Yeah. So we got up there, dived, and we surfaced just about 200 yards off of them, and I think we scared them a bit. And so we spent about 3 weeks, I think. It was quite a while. But in the evening, we would go in and anchor, and our boys, being quite enterprising, were thought ahead of time and brought all their fishing rods. So who's that, Joanne? And Brian Fisher, who was one of my officers, convinced me that maybe he could go ashore in the raft with 2 or 3 others. And who were the others? Blake? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, 2 or 3 of them. They took an FN rifle and went off hunting on the island and came back with little Bambies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Okay. Anyway, it was kind of fun. We took one of the deer and we held it up and went by the Indian vessel. And all the crew were out there. We were going to give it to them. Take it. But it wasn't long before they all disappeared. Everybody disappeared from off the deck. Yeah. So that was an interesting thing. So with Rainbow, I left in the summer of '70, and Ray Hunt relieved me, and Cliff Crow relieved Ray Hunt, and Lloyd relieved Cliff Crow. So the 4 of us commanded the only 4 commanding Rainbow. So I went back to Halifax and became a squadron ops officer. And one of the jobs during the first year there was to go down to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico and help plan all the exercises, because our ships used to go down there every winter. And we would have 1 or 2 boats down there. So I went down as the submarine rep, and we had a surface ship rep and an air rep as well. And it was interesting working alongside the Americans. But Roosevelt Roads, I don't know if you've been there or not, but it's huge, huge base. Yeah, did you? Yeah. 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 So I did that twice actually. The first time for 2 months, and the next time for 1 month. Jim Bell did the first bit, and I relieved him. But then I took command of Ojibwe in '71 from Jim Bell, and then I posted back to the squadron in '72. So when he did a year in command of Ojibwe, maybe 71, 72. Were you? Yeah, well, that's good to know. And then I back to the squadron. And in '73, I went to the Staff College in Toronto, and 2 years, followed by 2 years as a syndicate director at the Canadian Forces Staff School in Toronto. It's no longer there. So it's one thing about, as a squadron ops officer, I was also the CO of Daga and refit, and also CO of Okanagan and refit. So I can claim that I commanded all 5 submarines. Even though I took Okanagan to sea, actually, at the end of the refit before Jim Bell came and relieved me. Yeah. So there's a few photos that Brian Lapierre, who's the curator of the submarine section of the Naval Museum, had sent me. You may know some of the people. There. And this is Onondaga. There's Buster. There's Buster Brown right there. Yep. Yeah. Chiefs and Fields mess on the Ojibwa. Oh, Freddie Schatz and Terry Jones. Yeah. And there's Brian Lapierre, who does the Zoom every 2 weeks from Halifax. He does a very good job of it. And Bill Duguid from Paul Henson's place. Yeah. And a crew member, Ken McMillan. In fact, he was captain at the time. But Ken was a sub-lieutenant on Ojibwe with me. And poor old Ken, whenever we went first 2 days, he was so seasick. So seasick. Always seasick. Yeah, 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 right. They both were. Well, Ken was called chicken of the sea. Sammy Tuna, chicken of the sea. But then there's the Ken in the captain's cabin, I think, isn't it, Lloyd? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And he's in Halifax now. I'm on Facebook with him. And there's Terry again. Mm-hmm. Four ends is grills. Yeah. Okay, that ended my active duty in submarines. But after staff school, I won't go into the reasons, but I retired from the Navy in '76 after 22 years. and became a hog farmer in Ontario. That was a pretty good hog farmer, but in 1983, when the interest rates hovered at 18%, hog prices were bottomed out and the grain prices were topped up. Everything went south. So the bank invited us to declare bankruptcy when we were hog farming. And this happened to an awful lot of farmers. In fact, there were even suicides, unfortunately, from farmers who just got so upset. And I spent the next year doing odd jobs. I took a course in real estate and sold real estate for a bit, but I wasn't a very good salesman. And I managed a large hog farm for a little while. At the same time, a friend of mine was the CEO of the Grey and Simcoe Foresters, an infantry regiment in Owen Sound, which is about an hour's north of where we were living in Hanover, Ontario. And he asked if I'd like to join the regiment. So I signed up as an officer cadet one day and major next day. So, and appointed as deputy commander of the regiment. So how's that? So,
proper thing back.
Yeah. So I spent a year and a half as a soldier, and I went up there anytime I could because I didn't have a proper job. I'd lost the farm, and so I was up there and did every weekend I could. Went off to Camp Borden and crawled around fields and things like that. Meaford, over at Ipperwash, same places. But it was kind of fun. But when I was up there one day, I was looking through the correspondence, and I was going through the yellow page. They still have the yellow pages. I wonder, you know what I mean? The yellow pages, yeah. And it showed all the different postings of people all over the place. And I came across Lee Temple's name, and I knew that Lee had got out and bought a hotel in Powell River. And I think he spent only about 3 years there and went back in again. And he was working in the submarine acquisition project in NDHQ. So I found his phone number somehow and asked myself, well, why can't I do that? So I got in touch with, Lee got in touch with the career manager, who was also a friend of ours, Don Large. Yeah, no, Don. So Don phoned me up and said, okay, well, you go down to the recruiting center in London, and if you can pass the physical, we'll give you an offer. So before I knew it, I was being offered a contract to come back as a lieutenant with 10 years seniority and providing I could pass the physical. So I passed it all but the hearing. They still accepted me. So in February '85, here I was out of the Navy, 8.5 years, headed off to Ottawa to sign up and be assigned to the Director of Personnel Careers, other ranks. And that was an interesting job too. I worked with other people of other ranks, like artillery people, some of the other things, and I got to go around quite a bit. I went to Europe a couple of times, across the country to Chatham. Where else did I go? Oh, the artillery place in Manitoba, Shiloh, that's it, yeah. Talking about artillery trains. But after I'd been there a while, I kept bugging them over at CASAP to see if I could be posted there. So it was in the RFP stage of finding a replacement for the U-boats. So off I went with Lee was there, and Dent Harrison, who had been my engineer in Girls Rainbow, was the captain by this time. And of course, here I was back as a lieutenant, ran into Lloyd with the commander, and Peter Cairns was the commodore. And so it was kind of hard sometimes, but I just sat back and realized that the Lord meant me to come back, and He blessed me with coming back. So I accepted it, and I went to CASAP for 2 years. And while I was there, I was re-promoted again. And one of the things I did while I was there, I went over to Brussels twice as the Canadian representative on their submarine rescue committee. And on a third occasion, I took part in an actual submarine rescue exercise off of Stavanger in Norway. And the US had sent over one of their boats, and they'd flown the DSRV, Deep Submergence Rescue Vessel, over in the big Galaxy, 2 Galaxies, I think it took to get all the stuff over. And they hooked that on top of the US boat. And I was assigned on a Norwegian frigate for this exercise. And the British had also assigned their DSRV, which was just held 5 people. Of course, the American one could hold about 20. So we each had an opportunity to go down, and the French had also sent a submarine, and the Norwegians, of course, had one there too. But the one event that I was on, I went down on the British DSRV, in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, 400 feet down onto a French submarine. We latched onto her, opened the hatches, went down to the 4 ends of the French submarine. As soon as we opened the hatch, it just, we were overcome with garlic. Oh, it was awful. So we spent about 10 minutes down there, and then up again, out, and back, and then a wrap up afterwards. And then Ken McMillan convinced me that I should come down to Halifax and be the OIC of the submarine school, which they didn't have one at the time. So I did that for a bit, and then I also looked after Olympus when she came over, and then spent 2 years in Marcom, and then retired after spending 29 years and 7 months in the Navy and a year as a soldier. So that just about wraps up my career. My wife looked at this picture. See that? And you're there. And she looked at this picture. What did you say, dear?
You turned me on. I had forgotten what a good-looking person you were.
Yeah. Okay. So how did I do? Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me down. I appreciate it. I took a lot of time doing all that and finding all those pictures. It's amazing what you can find on Google. And Brian LaPierre sent me some from the Cod Squadron, and okay.
See the people on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, did you shut down the?
No. No. Didn't touch anything. No.
No, that was actually not.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. But when you consider those of us who have been around for a bit, when we joined the Navy, there were lots of people still who had been in the war. He had lots of medals, and like Captain Welland was our captain and ventured for the first 2 years. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I I had most of this prepared before because there's an organization in Camp Worth called the Elder College. I don't know if you have them here. At the community college, they have courses for seniors, and they asked me to do this presentation. It was much shorter than what I've done for you. And so I'd done it twice at the community college. So when Chris invited me to come and do it, I filled it out quite a bit. I found some more pictures and things like that. And I ran into a guy the other day. I was in Mark's warehouse in Campbell River. And this guy saw my cap. I had my Royal Canadian Navy veteran cap on. And he came up, and it turns out he's the range officer at the Noose. At the Noose. Yeah, yeah. So he's asked me to come down and give a presentation to their little group as well. So he just lives south of Campbell River. So real good. Yes. Yes, he did. Yeah. 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 I think Richard Sharp had been on the boat, one of those boats too, in the Far East. Yeah. But Chris? Okay. Okay.
Deal
with
with
it.
it. I don't know.
That was like, what, on Rainbow? Well, on the Jibway too. You were on the Jibway too, weren't you? Yeah. 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 But there was an interesting bunch from the girls, wasn't it? Ray Hunt and Brian Fisher. Well, Gordon Oakley is still, and Dent Harrison, I think, is still. Yes. Yeah.
Back in before.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to be trying, but I was a leading seaman. You know, the language and the heated conversation, junior officer to an admiral. I was quite something.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember that part of it, but I do remember that some of the guys had been across the jetty to another boat, which was about to be paid off, which was really nice and clean. Where the Argonaut was not very clean, so I had to go up to the squadron commander and ask him if he could have the boat cleaned up a bit. So they did, didn't they? Yeah. Medic. Yeah.
So. It was pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things, the mattress,
Were they?
this stuff,
Yeah.
so.
This- I didn't know that. Yeah. Yes. Mhm. My goodness.
When they built. That's more like.
I'm sure there's lots of things that I was never made aware of. No, no. Well, I know when we were just before we got to Panama Canal, everybody got sick, didn't they? Oh, I didn't, but in Panama, that in Panama, yeah.
No one makes. Smelling was really great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, the injury.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the one incident which I didn't mention, which we were out doing some exercises or trials, and we lost every inch. And at the same time, St. Croix was passing by. So I phoned up the COO of St. Croix and I said, "How would you like to practice your towing at sea?" So, so he obliged, and we worked up his towing crew and towed us to the entrance of the harbor, just off the entrance, and then we motored all the way back in alongside. They were going to send a tug out. We said, "No way, we're going to motor ourselves back in."
You remember when
Which what?
we used to use for a help while we were stressed? But we must admit it was really neat pushing